You are watching Co-op for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Sunday, November 12th, 2023 at around 3 p.m. Sundays are usually when we do our play-by-mail, but we're in the middle of a custom case, and the writer of that case, Matt, is taking off for this week, but we'll be back next week to continue that playthrough. So I thought today we'd return to Mugbook. This is the ultra rare, out of print, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective inspired game that I've done a long sort of deep dive into the components on a previous video, and we've actually played the first case of this. And it was an interesting experience. I am very curious to play another case and see what it's like. But let's do a little bit of catch up first. So after streaming 70 hours or so in October, I took a little break in November. So we've barely done any live streaming at all in November so far. I did post 2 reviews though. One solo reviewing Perspectives. That's that orange box behind me, which is a very interesting new kind of deduction game. Can't be played solo, but I did a review of that if you want to check it out. I do recommend it. And Greg and I posted a review of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre board game, which was terrible, a terrible game. So if you're curious how that went wrong, you can watch that review. And I've got a couple other reviews to do in the next couple days, but I think we'll also try to get some live streaming. I can see in the chat that one person is reporting that the stream is cutting out. I should do more. I should check in with the channel more frequently like I used to. Can everyone else let me know if they're having any trouble with the stream? Not that I can do anything about it if you are. Okay, anything else we need to catch up on before we start here? I said we'll go back to our play-by-mail next Sunday. Sometime this month, I've promised to do another update on the development of the game I'm working on called High and Low, the detective, Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective inspired game set in 1930s, 1940s, sort of film noir, New York City. And Joseph says the stream is working, but the camera is dropping frames. Not according to my OBS panel here, but maybe YouTube is having some trouble with it. Okay, so let's decide what we want to do here. Here's the question we have in front of us for our playthrough of Mugbook. How many people in the channel already joined me for the first case of Mugbook? I'm going to talk a little bit about it just to refresh our memory since it's been so long, but if you haven't watched the first case and you're curious about the game mechanics, you might want to check that out. Okay, let me pose the question that's in front of us, though, that we have to decide. And that is what case to play. Now, I've put on the thumbnail here, case 2. But if we take a look, you'll remember one of the major, there's a bunch of differences between this and Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, but one of the major ones is that this has much less narrative. It's much more concise, to the point paragraphs. And look how many scenarios come in this book. It's 30 or so. Okay, so we played the Sacred Heart Home Arson. It was actually better than I expected. I expected this to be terrible because most of the fun from playing Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is reading these long, well-written dialogues. And here we don't have that. This is much more sort of bullet point, one sentence each person you talk to. But it was an interesting enough case, and it felt much more like doing real police shoe leather work, and we can talk about that a little bit more. Okay, now the game does say here, somewhere, that they basically suggest you play them in order. I thought it said it here, but maybe it says it in the rules. Somewhere it suggests you basically play them in order because what happens in one case could affect the story. They're chronologically told, I guess. So we played the first case. These are not spoilers. This is the introduction. So January 3rd, but no date. But the next case is January 8th or January 9th, I guess. And then the case after that is February 8th. So they do go chronologically, and the game basically recommends you play them in order. However, Rob in the Discord and a viewer of this channel, and Rob is here now. Rob did a lot of work taking the documents here, which were never digital originally, and scanning them and then reformatting them and making them available. And you'll find a link to those downloads in the description of this video. I believe it should still be there. If you want to play along, you can actually download the mugshots and the case introductions. It's actually done very nicely, better than the book, than the original. And Rob has said that he highly recommends we don't play case 2 because it's the longest, most complicated case in the entire book. Now, Rob hasn't played these, but he has gone through them. So Rob says, I recommend save case 2. It's by far the largest case in the game. No idea why it's placed as the second case. And maybe because it's been so long since we played it, maybe we should cut our teeth on some easier, shorter cases before we jump into case 2. Although I am very curious to see what a long case looks like. So I'm going to suggest that we go along with Rob's recommendation and skip the second case and just jump ourselves right to the third case, which is the Garcia dry cleaning robbery. That's my suggestion, but I'm going to leave it up to the channel. So if everyone will just type vote, and you can vote case 2, vote long case or vote next case. Something like that. Just vote in the channel whether you want to play the super long case that will be exhausting, that Rob recommends we don't play. We will eventually play it. But if the channel wants to play the long case, I will go along with the channel. Okay, 2 votes for case 3 so far. 3 votes for case 3. Joseph Mayu says he votes for 24/7 stream of the remaining 29 cases. I always was a fan of the marathons. They used to put on TV Twilight Zone marathons or Honeymooners marathons or Starsky and Hutch marathons, Simpsons marathons. So it's easy to talk me into doing some of these crazy things. But I do want to remind you that in December on this channel, we are going to finally break out the longest, biggest, most expensive mystery game I own, which is a game by Cozy Killer called Hidden Listener in 12 parts. They're currently running a Kickstarter for their newest game, and it's so expensive. Their games are so expensive, but then there's almost no reviews of it. I don't know how that works. But we're going to play that in December, and we're going to find out if it's worth the money. Okay, so we've got mostly the votes for playing case 3. Teresa says, I don't care which one. I'm confused about this game anyway. Okay, so we're going to skip over case 2 as Rob recommends. I'm going to stop this poll, and we're going to play case 3, and then we'll come back to case 2 sometime a little bit later. All right, so why don't we just read the intro here, and then I'll remind you some of the mechanics of how this game plays and what we've got, and we'll look at the mug book and the maps. But let's just jump in and read the intro. Okay, it's the Garcia dry cleaning robbery. February 8th, 11:45 a.m. Begin the investigation on 1-3. I'll explain that in a minute. Location, Kent Avenue and King Boulevard. Report. At approximately 11:45 a.m. on the morning of the 8th, two young men wearing ski masks over their faces entered the Garcia dry cleaners at 162 and forced Mrs. Lonnie K. Garcia to empty the cash register at gunpoint. Mrs. Garcia cooperated with the gunman fully and turned over $43.76 in cash. As the two gunmen were leaving the store, Paul Garcia, 20, came from the back room and leaped over the counter in an effort to stop the thieves. In the attempt, Paul was shot in the chest and the suspects escaped. Paul is listed in critical condition at Memorial Hospital. Initial investigation. Suspects are described as young, late teens, early 20s, Hispanic or Caucasian males, both under 6 foot, slight builds, wearing blue jeans, leather jackets, and tennis shoes. Suspects fled on foot south on King Boulevard. Okay, then we're told that a ballistics report will be available on 2-3. I'll come back to that in a second. And then we've got some witness statements. Witness 1 is Lonnie K. Garcia, Hispanic female, 48 years old, 5'2", 140 pounds. They came in and pointed their guns at me. I said, okay, and I was giving them the money. Next thing I know, Paul was jumping at them. The gun went off, and my little Paul is on the ground bleeding. They were only boys, I could tell. They were afraid. They couldn't even talk. They were so afraid. He said, money. That was all. Oh, dear Lord, please let my little Paul be okay. He's my good boy. He's never been in trouble like his brother. Interesting. His brother's been in trouble. You don't think the brother's one of the robbers, and that's why he wasn't talking. Okay, let's see if we got another witness. That's it. Okay, so that's the entire introduction. All right, so let's explain what these times mean. In this game, time goes by each turn. You're told that the moment of the crime is always on day 1. So the first number here is the day, and then the second number is the quadrant of time every 6 hours. So 1-1 would be from midnight to 6 a.m., and 1-2 is 6 a.m. to noon, and 1-3 is noon to 6 p.m., and 1-4 is 6 p.m. to midnight. That's not so important. You're basically always told, though, that the crime happened on day 1, and you start the case the section after the crime. So the crime happened here in day 1, quadrant 2, and so you start the case on day 1, quadrant 3. You don't have to really remember much of that, but you do have to keep track of where you are. So we're starting at 1-3, which we can use this big giant thing if we wanted to, or we can just, we should probably just get separate little counter for this, or we can just keep track. So each turn will advance the clock. So we'll have one turn here, a turn here, and then it'll be the second day. We'll have 4 turns on each day. Okay, now another mechanic of this game is that some things happen depending on how far into the case it is. And this is a cool idea, that something is going to happen on 2-3. I'm just going to keep a separate chart for that. And that tells us the ballistics are available on 2-3. So by the time we take 4 turns or so, we're going to get access to the ballistics report. All right, so now let me remind you of the mechanics of how this game works. Much like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, all of our actions are spent going to talk to someone. We've got a large map, and we've got a directory of white pages listing people by name and yellow pages listing businesses. There's a little bit of a difference in how the people are listed, but let's come back to that. A major difference in the way this game works mechanically is when you want to talk to someone, you just look them up by name in this book. Most of this book is just a list of people by name. And the other thing we need to do to look someone up is we need to know the case number that we're playing. So we're playing 105687. So all the cases are jumbled together under someone's name. So when we look up someone's name, if they're involved in a different case, it'll be headed with a different number. So 5687 is our case number. When we look someone up to talk to them, that's what we're going to be looking for. All right. So unlike Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, where we go to a specific location, here we just say who we want to talk to and then look them up by their name. Or if we want to go to a business, we just look up that business in this book alphabetically. So if we want to keep track of a couple of leads we might want to follow, we were told about some people already here. So we could, for example, decide we want to go to Garcia Dry Cleaners, and we would just look them up. We're told the business number, 162. And we're told generally where it is, Kent Avenue and King Boulevard. So we're going to take a little bit of time before this case gets started to localize ourselves. So let's try to find Kent Avenue and King Boulevard. And let me just show you an alternate way to do that. There's a couple ways we could do it. We could try to just find it on the map by streets. Kent and King Boulevard. Okay, so one way we could do it is we could just try looking for those streets here. Another way we could do it is we could look up in the directory, and there is this listing of streets, first avenues and then streets. So if we look up King Avenue, not sure why it's not alphabetical because it's listed from north to south, I believe. Yes. Okay, so there's Kent Avenue near the bottom here, so we could find it that way. And then King Street, this would tell us how far over it is. And so that's one way that we could find King and Kent, but let me show you another way. We're told that this is the address of Garcia's Cleaner. So I don't believe the white pages list businesses. So I don't think if we look up under G, we will find Garcia's Cleaner. So we can't find them that way, although we could find the people by that name. But let's look in the yellow pages just because I want to show you an alternative way to do this. If we look under cleaners, if we get lucky, so they're not under clothing. Where do you think they would be listed under? It's possible that they're not even listed under. I thought we might find them under dry cleaning. Okay, so here is Garcia's Dry Cleaning. Now, there's their number that was mentioned in the introduction, 162. But in the yellow pages, it also tells you the general location under the grid. Now, Debbie points out, reminds me to say something, which is not 100% true, because I got into trouble with this a little bit earlier. So we know the business name is 162, and we've confirmed it. Now, what you'll also note, however, is that mostly the businesses are listed numerically. So if you knew it was number 162, you could just go down and you'd find out that 162 is in dry cleaning. You can't 100% guarantee that, though, because occasionally that's wrong. But in general, it's right. Okay, so Garcia's dry cleaning is at H11, lowercase h11. So now if we return to our map and find lowercase h and 11, we know it should be in this area somewhere. And if we do that, we see that there is our 162. So there's Garcia's cleaning. There's Kent Avenue and King Boulevard. Kent Avenue and King Boulevard. Okay, so we found it. We're going to mark, as we normally do, on the map with these removable stickers so we can keep track of locations for the fun of it. Okay, but remember, if we want to talk to them, we don't need to know that number. We just go to Garcia. We just look up Garcia. Okay, so that's where our crime occurred. And then we were told in the introduction a couple more things. So let's go back and relook at this. We take our time when we're getting started, especially since we've not played this game much and since it's so different, to make sure we're all on the same page. All right, so what else have we learned? We've learned it's a Mrs. Lonnie Garcia. And then her son, Paul, who's 20, is the guy who got shot. Okay. He's in the back room, and he's at Memorial Hospital. So if we looked up Memorial Hospital, we might be able to talk to him, especially since we don't have a witness statement from him. That might be useful. Okay, we're given descriptions. Hispanic or Caucasian, both under 6 foot, blue jeans, leather jackets. Okay, they fled on foot south on King Boulevard. Okay, so that's pretty cool. We might be able to track them if we go back to our map south on King Boulevard. There's not too much room to go south on King Boulevard. Like, where were they going? Why go south? Seems like most of the town is north. Maybe they were trying to leave town. Who knows? Okay. Now, I suspect that one of these kids may be one of the brothers. Maybe the brother. But let's take another look at this to see where I've got that from. She says the robbers were just 2 kids. They were scared. They barely talked. They couldn't even talk. That's the sort of clue that went off, like it's the brother. Okay. He said money, and that was all. So one of them talked and said money. The other one didn't even talk. And then she says, he's never been in trouble like his brother. But we don't know the name of the brother. Okay. And that's our entire intro. All right, so we could go to the hospital to talk to Paul. We could try to talk to Miss Garcia again. Even though we've got a witness statement, we might talk to her again, and we might want to try to find out about her brother. Sorry, her other son. We might just look up in the white pages and look under Garcia and see what we see. So there's Lonnie. She's listed at her place of work. That's how all of the listings work. Let me point out another difference with Sherlock Holmes. We are never told their home addresses. The game doesn't care about that. We're simply told where they work by number. So we know that Lonnie Garcia works at 162. Now, Paul, who just got shot, he also works at 162. But now that's probably the brother right there. And who's Condito? All these two people, all four people are listed as working at the dry cleaner. A Condito, a Juan, Lonnie, and Paul. So probably the brother is either Condito, could be the father, could be the brother, or Juan. Okay. Now notice that knowing that doesn't really help us, because when we look them up in the directory, well, there might be a separate entry for Condito, a separate entry for Juan, so maybe that's important to us. So I want to check in with the chat for a second before I explain a couple more things to remind us. Jonathan says, is there a bus stop across the street? Doesn't really seem very south, but maybe they jumped on a bus. Macon says, in real life, I don't think so, but there's an Agatha Christie where a woman doesn't recognize the man she's married. And Tina says, wearing masks defeats the name of the game with the mug book. Okay. John says, it does say Paul's in critical condition, though, so maybe he won't even be able to try to talk to us. All right, so a couple more things to mention. Time does tick by, even if you don't find an entry for the person you want to talk to, so you do have to be wary. There are no strict time limits, but we might encounter something that tells us there's a time limit, but probably not. However, our score at the end of the case may very well depend on how long it took us. The way you end the game is you don't say, I've figured it out. You basically say where you're going to go to arrest someone, like who you're going to arrest and where, or you might decide here's where you're going to execute a search warrant. So you make that statement before you turn to the answer, the solution. And then the solution may tell you, like, hey, if you chose to arrest this guy, you get this score. And if you didn't, you get this score. So you have to decide before you read the solution. You don't get questions right up front. You first decide who you're going to arrest, then you read the solution, and then you see the consequences of that. There's also one more mechanic, and that's the alert mechanic. Before you look someone up, you have to declare if you want an alert. If you want to declare an alert. An alert is sort of like visiting the person with backup. And most of the time that won't be necessary. And if you draw an alert, if you declare an alert and look someone up and there's nothing about that in their entry, then you've basically brought backup for no reason and you're penalized an extra tick of the clock, you lose a turn. Some places will say that you should have declared an alert, like maybe you encountered someone dangerous. If you didn't bring backup to that, it'll tell you to read a special paragraph that might say that something like the guy escapes or he punches you in the face. And if you did bring backup, you get to read some bonus section. So that's the alert. And then there's one more thing I've forgotten, which is the channel is trying to catch my attention about, which is that we have to read the goals. So an odd thing about Mugbook, and I wonder if they didn't realize this after the fact, but we read our introduction and now we're told before we actually start to jump ahead at the end of the cases and read what's sort of expected for us. And it's just a big list of conditions. And here's what it says for our case. It says, what it wants from us is to arrest the two people responsible for the robbery of the Garcia dry cleaners and the shooting of Paul Garcia. Bonus for determining who sold the suspects the pistol used in the robbery. Okay, so we're told why that isn't laid out in the introduction is a mystery to me. It may be that they originally thought that that was like a hint, and that advanced players shouldn't need to see that. All right, but arrest both suspects and find who sold them the gun. Okay. One more thing I have to do, although Debbie has already gone and looked up Mugbook stuff. Debbie says, I think it's clear from the last case that we're expected to go straight away to the Mugbook. I found a few suspects that match the description. And Debbie says there's a section for gun stores in the directory. Okay, so before I go to the Mugbook, and I want to talk about that, hopefully by the time we get to then that third case or so, we won't have to spend so much time going back over the rules. But I want to mention one more thing, which is, what did I do with the directory? Is it in here? Okay, so one more thing about the directory. There is a page in the directory which is notes from a Detective Delaney. And we're told that this guy disappeared, maybe something bad happened to him a few years ago. So I expect I kind of am thinking we're going to run into this guy's mystery at some point. But he's got a list of people that we might contact. And there are some fences here that deal with stolen stuff. We've got informants, a guy in Chinatown, street gangs, mob activity, downtown street news, drugs, a burglary guy, downtown street news, stolen merchandise, street girls, escorts, pimps, guns for hire, miscellaneous notes about people who are running book, who are running girls, dealers, drug dealers, working girls. Okay, so we could just try to go to any of those at any point. Let's figure out what neighborhood this is that this occurred in. It looks like it's Riverside is the name of this area. So we're in Riverside. I scanned and printed out a copy of these that we could write in. So first question is, we do have a burglary informant. And do we have any Riverside informants? Downtown mob activity, Northwest, not really. And do we know about these different neighborhoods? Let's see. Somewhere we're told a little bit about the different parts of the neighborhood, but in order of development from oldest first. Okay, not very useful. Okay, so now we could look up gun stores and try to find who sold them a gun. All we know is that at this point, though, that it's a pistol. So that doesn't help us too much. And now let's quickly take a look at the Mugbook. In our previous case, it seemed like it wanted us to go through the Mugbook more. Although they're wearing masks, but we do have a height description, so we could try to rule something out. However, what I wanted to show you here, Debbie looked for it, but there is something important. So there's people with their mugshots, their criminal history, and their stats, their height, their weight, their race, and their age. So that could help us narrow people down. And then there are these laser photos, which could be from people from other countries, like international drug dealers, whatever, people that we don't have local criminal history on. But the mug shots are not alphabetical, but there is a list here that is alphabetical. And I think we should see if the brother has been arrested. So I just want to see, because we know the brother has been in trouble. Oh boy, look at that. Condito Garcia. C. Garcia. Remember that we've got two other Garcias in the phone book. So on page 2 is Condito Garcia. Let's see if he matches the description. All right. Where is Garcia Condito? Here he is. All right. Is this one of the sons or the father? Let's take a look here. He's 28 years old, 6'1", Hispanic, aka Connie G. Second-degree assault, concealed weapon, criminal mischief, first-degree sexual assault, birthmark left inside elbow. It served 7 years in the state pen for sexual assault. Yikes, this is a bad guy. Now, 6'1". What does she give us? What does her witness statement say? She says, under 6 feet, slight builds, late teens, early 20s. So, how old is she? She was like 40, right? So that's got to be the older brother, not the husband if she's 40. She's 48. So that confirms that this is not the husband. That means this is the brother who gets in trouble with the law, and it looks like my theory is wrong that he's involved, because he might be the reasonable age to be the brother that gets in trouble, but he's too tall and too old. So I think my initial theory that the brother was one of the robbers is wrong. Okay, well that's pretty cool though that we were that suggests he's ruled out. Maybe you might expect that Paul would recognize his brother anyway and wouldn't jump out over the counter. All right, so well, there goes my one main lead. I thought we were going to track down the brother. South on King Boulevard. Okay, so here we're ready to start the case now. We've brought ourselves back up to speed on the mechanics. We know our goal. I think the thing to do at this point is to take our first break early, and you've gotten a flavor for the game. If this is something you want to join us for the next couple hours, we'll be back in 8 minutes to start playing, or you could dip out now and watch it later or skip this one. I'll see you all in 8 minutes. Okay, we're back and ready to get started. We've got a couple of suggestions from the channel. Debbie found some mugshots that looked interesting. We've got gun store. We've got an informant that deals with drugs, which I think is quite promising. But I do think we're told that people fled south on King Boulevard, and I do think we should spend a moment to look at our map and see what is south, because most of the map is north. And I think it would behoove us to see if we can spot anything like this is a bus route, it looks like. Now, we've never used that, so I'm not sure how to use that. And then we've got businesses here. So that's a fire station. Park, the lakeside. So we could look up these businesses and see if there's any witnesses. That's not something we've had luck with before. But I wonder about this bus for a second. Can we? How would we follow up on that if we wanted to? And where else could they be going? So they could be going southwest or southeast. Southeast is a studio production company. Honey Farm. This does not seem like a place that the young robbers would go to. But what about here? Holly Hills again. This seems like a richer neighborhood. I have a hard time believing these kids are here, but they could be leaving town. Now, what do we do with this bus? Are there buses? Let's just look this up for a second in the yellow pages. Bus companies. So actually, it looks like that bus symbol is not a generic bus, but a sightseeing tour. Uh, 111. Here's a good example of where the numerical listing sort of fails. I want to show you this. Look at this building. So there's 111. That's the sightseeing tour company. That's why these buses are here for that. But now look at this location 114. You see that? Now we were saying earlier that that in the yellow pages they're listed numerically, but I want you to see something. Oh, I guess there is. Okay, so 114 actually is here. It's the animal hospital. So if you wanted to ask who might be witnesses, 294. They ran past 294, which is liquor store. So 2 liquor stores. And then 253. These aren't strictly numerical order, just to remind you. Looks like 253. It's a hardware store. So there's no bus station for them to get on. There's only the sightseeing tour people or the liquor store people. 359 was a hardware store and 379 was a restaurant. So that doesn't bode well for us tracking down their escape. All right, let me see in the chat. I think maybe Debbie says, I think it is a bus. It's not the same symbol. I don't think the bus car graphic on the map is indicating bus stops. It's just for decoration. Maybe so. You're right. There are buses everywhere. But there's no, well, maybe I take it back. There is the Metro City Bus Company at 110. So, and that's at Y25. It's all the way over here, though, is where the headquarters of that bus is. Here's the here's the headquarters of the bus company. So they're in charge, I guess, of all these buses. So we could go to them and say, I want to speak to the driver and see if he saw anything. Seems like a long shot, but it's certainly possible. But maybe we should save that for a little bit. But it's certainly a possibility. Let's look at our informants again, because I do think that this does have the earmarks of a bit of a a bit of a gang activity. So let's see. Northwest Street Gangs. Dominguez. So he's Hispanic. Northwest. We're not really in Northwest, though. But he's a possibility for us. They didn't steal merchandise. They stole cash. Of course, they could be drug addicts. And another thing to think about is, I apologize for it taking us so long to start our first lead here, but part of the joy of this game for me is sort of trying to get into the mindset of a police officer in this game rather than Sherlock Holmes. And so we're spending some time trying to understand the thinking of the authors of this game. Now, I did want to suggest something. At first I thought, okay, it's the brother. He's in trouble with the law. Maybe he's somehow wrapped up in this. And then his description didn't match, and so I sort of wrote him off. But you could look at it from the other direction. The brother, Candido Garcia, has done hard time. He is not to be trifled with. And now his brother has gotten shot. So if he's not involved in this, he might have his ear to the ground asking his contacts in the underworld who might have done this. So I kind of think we're going to want to talk to him regardless. Get a feel, could he have been involved in this? I want to recommend a movie. I want to talk about movies. So I know we haven't even taken our first turn. I want to talk about movies for a second here. First of all, Before the Devil Knows You're Dead, I want to recommend, with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Ethan Hawke. Great movie. And but the other movie I want to recommend or talk about is a movie that just came on Netflix called The Killer. Who knows the director of The Killer? Who watched it? Who knows what movie I'm talking about here? TJ Moneycut says there's a liquor store nearby. They chose to rob a dry cleaner's. A liquor store owner may have a gun. I think you're probably safer robbing a dry cleaner. Jonathan Warner says it's Fincher, yes. So why am I drawing a blank on his first name? David Fincher. Anyway, Seven, one of my favorite movies of all time, was directed by him. And the reviews seem to be lavishing praise on The Killer and saying Reptile's a bad movie. All of the critics hated Reptile. I don't get it. Like, to me, this Killer movie was a real wasted opportunity. But far, far inferior. Far inferior to Reptile. And still worth watching, but far inferior. All right, it's time for our first move. Where shall we go? Informant. Informant, burglaries. It's not going to be... All right, we shouldn't talk to our burglary confidential informant because they didn't rob stuff that they have to sell. So, yeah, let's go to our street gang informant and see if or the crime scene. Yes, we should go to the crime scene. All right, let's go to Garcia's dry cleaner as our crime scene. So the game suggests if you're playing solo, you should write down where you're going. So we're going to Garcia's dry cleaner, not their home. So let's see if there's an entry for that. Okay, what's our case? 105687. Okay, let's see how we do this. So we're going to look up Garcia's dry cleaner. There's probably going to be multiple Garcias, which are going to be hard to avoid reading. You shouldn't be looking at this. I'll take the first thing. Okay. So let's see what happens. So if we go to Garcia's dry cleaning, it doesn't like it to be so small. I may have to adjust this. Okay. So you can see there's entries for two different cases, but we're playing 5687. We've got a link to, which means if you try to go there, it's the same as trying to go to Garcia Lonnie K. So now we find Garcia Lonnie K, who's over here. Okay, so let's read Garcia Lonnie K for our case. Try not to read the other stuff. Ugh. Okay, it doesn't like the cubes being so close to each other. I'm gonna have to adjust that setting. Okay, she says, when the boy's father died, Condito had to be the man of the family. It made him tough, you know, but he has always been good to Juan and Paul. If I know Condito, he can't just sit still while Paul is up in that hospital. Okay, so that's our mention that Condito, the bad brother, I'm moving our time clock ahead. She says what I was saying, that he might be out. He's either out there looking for the criminals or he's involved. So now I think we should go talk to Condito Garcia. So we go back to Condito Garcia. Remind me to adjust that setting for the next stream. Okay. So Garcia Condito, it says, see the mugshot. That's see mug. See mugshot. Okay, interesting. It says the following statement to be read on or before 4:3 only. So if it takes you too long to get here, you don't get to read it. On or after chapter 4:4, turn to alert section and link to Garcia. That's interesting. All right, well, we're before then, so we get to read this. What's happening here? Why won't it? Doesn't. Okay. Look what those sleazy punks did to my brother, man. Why aren't you out there trying to find them instead of hassling me, man? Jeez, I can't believe you dudes. Really, man. What have I got to do, man? Go out there and get them myself? Okay, so he's not helping us. But he's complaining. All right, so that's 2 turns. We're now on 2-1. Not time for ballistics to come in yet. I don't know. See, it didn't give us much of a description of his attitude. Seems genuinely like he wants us to go get those kids, but he could be involved for all we know. All right, should we talk to our informant now? Yeah, let's talk to our informant. So, Ron Dominguez, Northwest Street Gangs. All right, so we're going to look up Ron Dominguez. Okay, so he does have an entry for this case, which is good. Let's see what he says. He's actually in the mug book. Let's take a look at that in a second. He says, "What? You mean those 2 who robbed the dry cleaners? Sure. What do you want to know? Who they are? I don't know. But I heard it was both Latinos. Heard a couple people say they heard these 2 guys, Jim and David, bragging about how they robbed Garcia's. That's all I heard." Jim and David, huh? Okay. That's a good lead. That is a very good lead. All right, so now we're on to 2. Jim and David, huh? What about our mug book now? And Domingo was in the mug book himself. Let's look him up, and then let's see if maybe we can't find a Jim and David. Debbie, you found entries in the mug book that you thought matched our age and demographics. Was any of them named Jim or David? Let's see if we can find Domingo here just to get a look at who we just talked to. Dominguez, RF and RT, 17 and 7. Which one were we just talking to? R. Don't know which one. RF and RT, 7 and 17. Okay, let's see if we can find this. So 17, Ronald Frank Dominguez. Shoplifting, spent 2 years in the Marines. So this could be our informant, or this guy's our informant. Prison activist, member of IFPR, Inmates for Prison Reform. One of them is our informant, but I don't know which. Let us look at that list and see if we can pick up any Hispanic named people that might have a first name. They're just first initials, Jim and David. So we're looking for a J or a D that might be Hispanic. Let's look for J. That seems to be less common. $48, that doesn't sound Hispanic. Gates doesn't sound Hispanic. Green, not really. Although they could have been Caucasian, we're told. So normally we wouldn't take this so seriously. yet. We wouldn't waste our time on the mug book, but this game seems to reward it, so it does seem like maybe we're supposed to look through this. James Hernandez. James Hernandez fits the description, says Debbie. Okay, let's look that up again. So Hernandez J, page 12. Here we go. James Hernandez, aka Jimmy, 21 years old, 5'10", Hispanic. Doesn't have much of a crime record. Resident of Grant. Now that's interesting. Okay, so we've got our first suspect here, James Michael Hernandez, a resident of Grant. Jimmy. So we're still looking for a David, huh? It wouldn't be surprising if not both of them were in there. Let's see. John David Henson, who's this? 6'1", a little too tall. Looking for Davids here. Now, where is Grant? Is Grant to the south? Because that would be very interesting, wouldn't it? How do we find out where Grant... Okay, so this is actually interesting. I want you to see something. Grant is actually up here, far north. So that argues against our guy, James Michael Hernandez. Obviously not definitively rule him out, but he's walking in the wrong direction. On the other hand, if they had to hop on a bus, then it would make sense. Who's this? Mark David Hoskins. Who's this? Flip Hoskins. He's the right age. I'm going to write him down. Mark David Hoskins. What? Just scan through the rest of these quickly. Now I've got women. Okay. All right, let's check in with the chat here. Grant River is southwest. Hal Von Cooper, aka David Vaughn, 20 years old, white. Hal Von Cooper, aka. Seems like, you're not using digital search to search for names, are you? Okay, in Rob's directories, that would be interesting. Okay, David Vaughn. Let's see if we can't find Vaughn. Debbie says, yes, I am. All right, well, that's debatable. It looks like a 13 or 15. Cooper 15 or 13. I guess it's not the worst thing. All right, let's take a look at this kid here. Okay. Hal Von Cooper. AKA David Vaughn. Coop. Shoplifting, public lewdness, shoplifting, purse snatching, reform for boys. Okay. So that's another guy with the right demographics for us. Okay. Now, in one more turn, our ballistics is going to be available. I think we should look up our suspect here, James Michael Hernandez. He seems most promising to me. Let's look him up and see what happens. He lives in foreign, which he lives in a different town, which makes me think he might have gotten on a bus. All right, so I'm going to look up James Michael Hernandez. And let's see what happens. All right. Look at this. So here we got an entry for him. Following statement to be read between 1-3 and 4-3. A lot of places have told us we have to read it before 4-3. This feels like it's giving us a time limit. At 4-3, we're in trouble. Okay, he says, Garcia? I don't know no Garcias. I mean, listen, what do you want? On Wednesday, I was just hanging out, with a friend. Who? Bobby. I don't know his last name, just Bobby. We were over at the steakhouse. The MW Steakhouse. They got some video games, We had a few beers. Okay, so he's given us his alibi. Already it's a bit suspicious if this is a place in because he doesn't live in this place. And he says with Bobby. Okay, and I just want to remind us this is a Wednesday. Okay, so our ballistics report has come in, and we need to make a note that on 4-3, some bad things are happening. Because all of our things say, hey, if you try to talk to this person after 4-3. So let's see if we can't find this steakhouse before we read our ballistics. What are we looking up here? Restaurants? So here's our steakhouse. E12. Now, I got some news for you. Let me show you where E12 is. Here's our big map of the city. Here's Garcia's that was robbed, right? E12 is here. It's like next door to the robbery. It's literally across the street from the robbery. 389. Where's 389? Why don't I see it? Here. So he claims to be with a friend right there. Boy, that's a coincidence. That is a real coincidence. Coincidences like that don't happen in real life. So I think we've got our guy. Debbie says we do have a Robert Dwayne Hayes, aka Bobby. If you're gonna do the search, you could just tell me what page it's on too. All right, let's see. Robert Dwayne Hayes. He says he doesn't even know his last name. I just assumed he was making something up, but page 7, huh? So here's our Robert Dwayne Hayes, age 20, Bobby, kidnapping and theft. Okay. Okay. So we've got another suspect, but our main suspect that we need to lock on like a missile is this guy who's right next door to this thing, which is ridiculous. So he's got to be our guy. So we probably want to visit that steakhouse, check his alibi. I wouldn't be surprised if he really was there, but yeah. So let's go. It's time for our ballistics. So let's check out ballistics here. So we're told ballistics become available on 2-3 at the crime lab, which it now is. So we can now turn to ballistics, which are just in, are they at the end of the book? Is that right? Okay, so yeah, crime lab reports. And we want ballistics. Okay. So here's the ballistics report. 1 lead bullet recovered during surgery on the victim of the shooting, Paul Garcia. Bullet was .32 caliber, 98 grains in weight, round nose configuration, made of soft lead with a tin content of 5%. Did not exhibit signs of having been copper jacketed at any time. Rifling, left land and groove impressions on the bullet, which were right-handed and twist, showed 6 lands and 6 grooves. we could use that to match up if we find the weapon. Indications from the findings led to conclusion that the firearm used in this shooting could be Smith & Wesson, Charter Arms Company, Rossi, or several other imported brands and make. Smith & Wesson or Charter Arms being the most probable make. Okay, so that's the totality of our report. 32 caliber, 98 grain. That's not going to help us much, but if it's got rifling, so that means if we find the gun, we can match it up to the bullet, get a definitive proof that it was the same gun used. And then probable Smith & Wesson Charter Arms. Okay. I don't believe that costs a turn to read that, but I could be wrong. Maybe it does. Okay. Boy, that plot thickened when he gave us his alibi. It seems to me the natural thing, we could either talk to those other suspects that we've found from the mugshot, but it feels like we should check his alibi while they're still fresh in their mind. So I think we should go to that MW Steakhouse. See if they remember these kids. Okay, so we're moving along to 2-4, and we're going to look up MW Steakhouse, which I guess we look up under M. Let's see. Okay, so MW Steakhouse, if you look it up, it says, on our case, go to Fleming Susan, the waitress. Okay, so we look up Fleming Susan. Doesn't cost extra time to do that. Okay, here's Fleming Susan. Let's see what she says. She's 20-year-old. Jimmy Hernandez? He hangs out a lot around the steakhouse. Can't remember if he was there on Wednesday. He never comes in until late afternoon. He and that shadow of his, Bobby. I think Bobby's last name is Hayes. Okay. So he wasn't making it up saying Bobby. He really does have a friend named Bobby. He does hang around the steakhouse. She can't remember he was there that day, but that puts him familiar with the scene of the crime. And then she says he never comes around until noon. And she gives us Bobby's last name, Hayes, which is the person we had our eye on. And now the noon part is interesting because he never comes in until late afternoon. Late afternoon. So our Garcia robbery was at 11:45 a.m. So he gets there a little early, they rob it. Now, they didn't head up there afterwards, though, because you'll note that the steak shop is north of the robbery. So maybe they did get on a bus. Who knows? But that's our guys. So now it's time to go talk to Bobby Hayes, I guess. Did we move the counter for visiting Hernandez? Either way, definitely steakhouse next. All right, so we went to the steakhouse. I'm not sure if we did or not. We're not super strict on time here, so occasionally we might forget. But I suggest we now go talk to Bobby Hernandez. So I'm going to advance the clock. Feels like we got our 2 people. We might want to try to focus on the gun. Well, let's talk to Bobby Hayes. Who is he really, though? Robert Dwayne Hayes. Okay, let's look him up. We think this guy is involved. Let's see what his alibi is. Let's see what he claims. Hopefully we got to him before he had a time to coordinate. Okay, Robert Hayes. Oh, it's an alert. We should have declared an alert. All right, let's read it. This is our first time. Alert. Okay, now before I read that, let's read the rules about alerts. Okay, so if you want to declare an alert before you visit a place, you got to say it. Well, we didn't. Probably we should have, especially since we had spare time. Okay. Alert says the player's taking extra precautions. If it's called and it's not designated alert, you lose a turn. If an alert is not called but encountered, the statement following the alert will indicate the action that follows. But if you did call an alert, then you go to the special alerts section. So if we had called an alert, we wouldn't keep reading this. We would go to that alert. So that's a shame. All right, we've learned our lesson. So now we got to read this. This may be the first time this has happened to us. You find Robert Hayes sitting on an old lounge at the back of his ratty apartment. He jumps to his feet, and a 6-inch blade snaps out of a handle in his right hand. He slashes wildly at you, cutting the fabric of your shirt, leaving an 8-inch cut. In your effort to step away from the blade, you stumble into some trash cans. In the meantime, Hayes hightails it down the alley. Lose 1 turn. Hospital visit to treat cut. Okay, so we've lost them. We've lost him. He hightails it down the alley. Well, that's a shame. And did it say where we found him? His ratty apartment. Just for the hell of it, if we look up Hayes in the white pages, I just want to see what we're told. All right, so this is just a good example to show you. So Robert Hayes has an asterisk. Asterisk means he doesn't have a job. He's not retired. That's what the R is for. So we don't know how he makes his money. All right, so we've lost our guy because we didn't call for backup. How are we to know that we needed backup with him? Was he just, let's look at his criminal record. Did we not pay attention that he had a serious criminal record? Page 7. I just want to see if we had good reason to fear him. Robert Dwayne. Let's take a look at this guy that just pulled a knife on us. Second-degree kidnapping. I don't know if I would have made him out to be dangerous. Well, how are we going to get this guy arrested now? This is personal now. He didn't pull a gun on us, though. What do you think? Did they dump the gun? They didn't expect to have to shoot someone. I wonder if they dumped the gun somewhere. We could go to gun shop. Move the time in extra space. Yes, you're right. Extra space because we got penalized. Debbie says kidnapping is fairly serious crime. And we know one of the suspects shot Paul. Perhaps we should have called an alert. Okay, well, we didn't. It doesn't really matter for our case, though. It would have been nice to arrest him. But we weren't going to arrest him anyway. We'll arrest him now at the end of our case. Rob says we almost died, yeah. Gun shop. Gun shops. Okay, we know he hangs out here a lot. Do we have gun shops in this area? And what about our, hold on a second. These are kids. I don't think they can afford a gun, can they? What about, do we have any informants that knows about guns? Sex offenders, dealers. Let's not forget we've got another brother too. Is it possible the other brother is younger and involved in this? It's a long shot. Let's look at our gun shop, see if there's a gun shop nearby. Maybe they did buy one. So there aren't that many gun shops. E23 is fairly nearby. G30 is a little bit further. So if they were to go to any gun shop, see, where is E23? So we've got a gun shop. Garrett's gun shop is 248. Let's see. $248. Okay, so there's our steakhouse. There's our site of the crime. Here's our gun shop. I mean, if they spend their days hanging out in this neighborhood, it's possible. Shall we check out the gun shop? I don't know what other lead we have, is the problem. Other than the brother. Hey, we shouldn't rule out, hold on a second. Hold on a second. Paul jumps over the counter. He's 20. These kids are 20. He may know them. If they're hanging out in the neighborhood all the time, playing games at the steakhouse, I think Paul might have recognized them. I think we need to talk to Paul at Memorial Hospital. before we go to a gun shop. Debbie says, I think Dutch Wilders is closer. Is that right? Dutch Wilders is at capital W13. I see. W13. Well, you're right. It might be closer. 247. Okay, so we've got a gun shop. Got a gun shop here at 247. And a gun shop here somewhere. So maybe this is closer. I mean, pretty close. Well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to the gun shops, or do you want to talk to the brother in the hospital that may know them? The thing is, even if he knows them, we know them now, so we don't really care about knowing them. We need to find them or find where they got their gun. Yeah. But really, a gun shop? All right, let's visit one of the gun shops. Then let's try to talk to Paul in the hospital. Give him a little bit more time to recover. All right. Why don't we go to Debbie's? Thinks this one is closer. Let's go to 247, which is Dutch Wilder's gun shop. Let's just see if we get lucky here. All right, so I'm going to move the clock ahead. We're going to check out Dutch Wilder's gun shop, see if there's an entry for it. All right, so for our case, it says go to Wilder Dutch. Okay. All right. It's easy enough for these street kids to get a hot gun. They can buy a Saturday night special or a stolen gun for anywhere between 20 and 100 bucks. I don't like to go spreading rumors around, but I hear there's a shop here in Metro City that sells guns under the counter. All someone would have to do is show them the color of their money and they'll sell you whatever you want. Okay. So we want a shop that's selling hot guns under the counter. Does our guy know someone? Miscellaneous notes. Rare book. Saturday night special. Has our detective made a note that you can pick up a Saturday night special at Macon? What is Macon? What is Macon? Is that a person? Is it a place? Crestview, Macon. What is Macon? What is Macon gonna be? Don't search. You guys got to take it easy on the digital search. That's for last resort. Last resort. All right, so when we looked up gun shops, The channel seems to be saying that Macon and gun and ammunition G30. Okay, Macon gun and ammunition 249. Okay, so where's our G30? So it's still in the same basic area. Here. There's Macon. All right, let's look up Macon Gun Shop. Advance the time clock. We're getting close to when we expect the game is going to end, so let's hope this is it. Okay, here we go. Macon gun and ammunition. The store is cluttered and dirty. The two clerks up front seem to shy away when you first walk in the door. Linked to Charleston Rick, the owner. Are we going to call an alert on this guy? No. Because he's known. He's not going to attack us. Okay, look what he says. He says, listen, I don't know who turned you on to us selling hot weapons, but it's a lie. We're strictly legit. Now, if you want to snoop around this store, I want to see a search warrant. Okay, now, that's the end of the entry. That sounds like we've hit a dead end with him, but we suspect him. But don't forget that the very mechanic of this game says that when you're ready to solve it, let's take a look at how you end this game. Arrests and search warrants. If you want to make an arrest, a number of arrests, or execute a search warrant, you must do so on your turn before making a contact. Player may arrest search warrants only once per scenario. You say where your full instructions are, like who you're going to arrest and where you're going to search. Then you turn to the solutions and see what happens. So it feels like we should end the game by trying to arrest the two and search this store. But before we do that, let's go visit our guy in the hospital. But doesn't it seem like that's what we should do? Conduct a search warrant on this store? There was a question about why don't we declare an alert at every moment? Do we lose anything by calling an alert? Rob says yes. You lose a turn if it's not necessary. Jonathan says yes. Seems like we might have enough. Okay, so the only other thing is I want to visit Paul in the hospital. So let's look up Paul Garcia. Let's see if it sends us to the hospital or if that's going to be a separate trip. Okay, so if we try to visit Paul, it says go to the hospital. So let's go to Memorial Hospital. Okay, Memorial Hospital. If we look up our case, this is pretty cool. Paul Garcia is in critical condition, but his doctors allow you 30 seconds. Paul is weak and short of breath. I think maybe I might have known one of them. His eyes, I've seen like this guy, her something. Can't remember. First name, he's from high school. Okay, so Hernandez, he's confirmed he recognized the guy as we thought he might. I'm going to advance our time. And he knows him from high school. We still could talk to the younger brother who might know them. But probably we have enough to make our arrest. So it seems like Debbie says, yes, arrest James and Bobby, search the Macon shop. Debbie says we're running out of time. Yeah, I think it's time. I wouldn't mind talking to the younger brother, but he probably doesn't know anything. And now we have good evidence from dying wish from Paul. I have an alternate theory, though. Interesting. Brother said he'd do something if we didn't. That's interesting. All right, well, it's time for us to take our break. We're going to take a break, come back, but I do want to leave you with a thought. I'm going to have to throw a little monkey wrench in our decision making to make it a little more difficult for us. Before we take a break, here's something to chew on. We'll vote on this. So we believe we found the gun store that sells hot guns, right? Sells stolen guns, etc. That's Macon Gun Shop. So it would make sense to execute our search warrant there. He says you need a search warrant if you want to search. But we've got a ballistic report from our gun, the gun that was used to shoot Paul. If we use a search warrant on Macon's gun shop, we're not going to find our gun used to commit this crime. We might find evidence that he's selling illegal guns, but we're not going to find our gun. On the other hand, when we confronted Bobby Hayes in his shabby apartment, he made a run for it and stabbed us. Is it more likely that if we conduct a search warrant on his apartment, that we'll find the murder weapon? Something to think about. We'll take an 8-minute break. We'll come back and we'll wrap up this case, conduct our search warrant, arrest our suspects, and see how we did. I'll see you in 8 minutes. All right, we're back, and I think we've solved this case. We've got our two robbers that are close friends, hang out all the time right next to the scene of the crime. They were overheard being referred to as Jim and David. We've tracked them down from mugshots to be James Michael Hernandez, aka Jimmy, hanging out with his shadow, Bobby Hayes, Robert Dwayne Hayes, aka Bobby. Bobby stabbed us with a knife. We had to go to the hospital. He's getting arrested for sure, along with his shadow, James Hernandez. If we look at what we're told to do for this mission, which I still feel like maybe they didn't, maybe they thought after the fact that you should check this out. So for hard cases, hard mode, you wouldn't know what you're supposed to do. But given that we are allowing ourselves to look at this, it says, arrest the two people responsible for the robbery. Bonus for determining who sold the suspects the pistol. So we actually only have to determine who sold them, and we believe we know the answer to that is that guy who runs Macon's gun store. So we've got Bobby Hayes, James Hernandez, those are our robbers, and then the Macon gun owner sold it. And I think if it was up to me, I would conduct a search warrant. I'm going to recommend we conduct a search warrant on the gun shop. I was saying before, maybe we should do a search warrant of their houses, but I think that's going to be a given once we arrest them for robbery and this guy for stabbing us. Obviously, we're going to search his house. But I'm going to also, I think the optional one is we suspect this guy sold them the gun. I'm going to put in for a search warrant to search the premises, the shop, see if we can't come up with some evidence that they are selling stolen guns. In the channel, it was suggested, hey, if they're selling these hot guns, are they really going to keep records? But Debbie points out something that I think is true in reality. Even illegal businesses keep records. Yeah. Okay, so that's it. We've declared our intentions. Does anyone want to object or say anything different before we turn to the end? Because this ends the game. Once we turn to the solution, when naming who we're arresting and who sold them the gun, that's it. Now, let me just remind you that we don't have any proof that they bought this stolen gun here. It could always turn out that they bought the gun from the brother. But we do believe this guy is selling stolen guns. What about the ballistics? Should the ballistics give us pause? Because it's not a Saturday night special. Smith and Wesson. Smith and Wesson. Is a Saturday night special a Smith and Wesson? Can someone check that for us? It feels like that might be some outside the game knowledge. But can someone in the chat look up what a Saturday night special is? Let me bring over my tablet. This would be a good time to actually get a picture of this, because that one might be kind of useful for us to know. what a Saturday night special looks like. What's happening? Why isn't it showing it? That's weird. Can I re-trigger it? There we go. Saturday Night Special is a colloquial term in the United States and Canada for inexpensive, compact, small caliber handguns. I see, it's not a specific kind of gun. It's just a generic colloquial term for a small caliber handgun. Cheap guns used in poor neighborhoods. I never knew that. I always thought it was a kind of gun. Wider use with the passing of the Gun Control Act and banned importation and manufacture of many expensive firearms. Gun ownership advocates describe the term as racist in origin, arguing that many of the guns banned were typically purchased and owned by low-income black people. I don't know why you would call the term racist, though. Saturday Night Special. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. We learned something new. All right, so Debbie says we have 0 other leads on the gun. All right, let's do it. You're right, we have 0 other leads. We just have not visited all the Garcia brothers. That just is the only thing that gives me a little bit of pause. But I don't want them to get away, and I know we're approaching the time when I feel like the game is going to punish us for taking any longer. So I would like to talk to the last Garcia brother. And be like, you didn't give a gun away. But he's not in trouble. We've talked to the one son that's in trouble with the law. He's not involved. Okay, that's it. We're turning to the end. All right, here we go. Solutions. If you thought that text was tiny before, you ain't seen nothing. All right, here we go. We're arresting our 2 kids. We're fingering the Macon gun owner and asking for a search warrant. Let's read the solution. Solution. James Michael Hernandez and Robert Dwayne Hayes bought the Saturday Night Special that was used to shoot Paul Garcia in an under-the-counter transaction from Rick Charleston at Macon Gun and Ammunition. Although Charleston didn't pull the trigger when Paul Garcia was shot, his greed and irresponsibility in selling the weapon to Hernandez and Hayes led directly to the terrible accident. Accident is not the right word. Hernandez and Hayes had never attempted an armed robbery before. Both were scared stiff. Hernandez held the gun that shot Paul. Both Jimmy Hernandez and Paul Garcia had attended West High until Jimmy dropped out of school. Although they weren't close friends, they knew each other and respected each other's athletic ability. The sight of the 2 masked thieves pointing a gun at his mother outraged Paul, whose normally persuasive diplomatic nature might have prevented the shooting had he known that it was Hernandez holding the gun. On the other hand, Paul's streetwise brother, Condito, makes no pretenses at being the calm, level-headed diplomat, and Condito has vowed revenge. Okay, highest possible score is 12. What have we got? For arresting James Michael Hernandez and Robert Dwayne Hayes, both suspects, on or before 2-3-2-4-4-1. Well, we're here in this 4-1 to 4-2. But look at this, 5 MPs. If we had waited 2 more turns, it wouldn't have been in time for arresting either of them. For arresting them both, we get 5. If we arrested either of them, okay, well, we arrested both. All right, Candido Garcia stabs James Michael Hernandez to death in Mesa Park on 4/3 if Hernandez is not in custody. So if we had taken 2 more turns, this guy would have gotten stabbed to death by the brother. Pretty cool. For arresting Robert Dwayne Hayes, why is this over here and this over here? That's weird. So if you had arrested Candido Garcia, I see. So if you don't, if it gets past 4/3 and Candido kills him, you could then arrest Candido and get some extra points. Candido Garcia leaves the state on 6/1. So if it takes you too long to arrest Candido, he gets away. Bonus points for arresting Rick Charleston of Macon before 4/3, which we did. Okay, so we got 2 extra points for arresting him. And then we didn't do any false arrests, so we don't lose any points. Key witness clues. Kareem Abdul Salam. We don't know who that is. Dominguez, that's our informant. Aaron Donner, don't know who that is. Suzanne Fleming, that was the waitress. We got her. Paul Garcia, that's the guy in the hospital. We talked to him. Bert Nussbaum, we never talked to him. All right, so we've got 7 out of a possible 12. We did everything right. The only thing the game wanted from us was to do it faster. Now, what would have happened if we had brought an alert? Can we check the alert section and seen what would have happened if we had alerted before we talked to our guy who stabbed us? It's weird that we didn't get a demerit for that. Let me look up the alerts. So it was Hayes that gave us the alert. Okay, let's read what happens with Hayes. If we had declared an alert, remember he stabbed us. Let's read what would have happened if we had brought back up. Hayes jumps to his feet the moment he spots you, but it's too late. You've got the jump on him, and you stop him from reaching inside his jacket. While frisking him, you discover a switchblade knife tucked inside his trousers. You inform him he's under arrest for carrying a concealed weapon, and then read him his rights. Hayes says he knows nothing about the Garcia robbery. He refuses to talk about anything. You take him downtown. Although Hayes is in custody for the concealed weapons charge, further charges can be filed or dropped. Okay, so basically, if you declared an alert, you would have not got stabbed, not lost a turn, and you probably would have gotten credit for arresting him early, which would have given you more points. Joseph Mayu says that Kareem Abdul Salam was a really good person of interest when I played this case myself. Rob says, credit where credit is due. Jesse solved this pretty well on his own. Well, not on my own. I had help from the channel. What was Kareem Abdul Salam? Where was he from? How did you find him? Because we didn't really have any other good leads. How would we have found Kareem Abdul Salam? He's not an ally, is he? I'm very curious how we would have found this person that Joseph visited. The owner of the alcohol shop. You mean just a nearby witness? It's a nearby witness to the crime scene? Because that's pretty cool. We considered it. We said there were alcohol shops around. I'm really, I think that's quite interesting if it turns out that we would have gotten information by talking to the neighboring places. So, Joseph, are you saying that it was just because he was a nearby location that you stopped in? Because we considered it, and I would like to know if the game makes use of that mechanic. So, liquor stores. We've got Ace Liquors, 294, 284. Ballwood Liquors. Are you saying that just because they were nearby? No, that's not in there. All right, well, Joseph is not answering my question, and I'm not sure. Oh, Woodlickers. Bellwood Liquors, that was it. So, if we had, in the beginning, we identified that they went south after robbing the place. And we very early in the case said, well, if they went south, they went past these buildings. And we looked them up. And we noticed that these were a couple of liquor stores here. But we didn't follow up on it. But if we had to, we would have. And so it turns out that actually one of them did have good information. So that's pretty cool, and it's something for us to remember when we play this game again. It told us they fled south, so we might have followed up on those leads. Although if we had done that, we may have run out of time. So that's interesting. All right. So normally we would take a break and then come back and talk about the case, but maybe we'll just talk about it a little bit here since we've only been back from break for 18 minutes. First of all, let me say, if you like this kind of content, if you like these live stream playthroughs, I hope you'll give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and get notified about new videos. It is an unexpected pleasure, still unexpected to me, to be able to share these experiences with the channel, to play this together. Sometimes I watch these other YouTube channels where they're playing a board game and they're trying to involve the chat and the channel, but it doesn't really look like they're having fun. To me, it looks like they're just playing a game to get content on the channel or something. For me, it's a pure joy to be able to share this and play with the channel. If I tried to play these games by myself, it would not be fun. And the fun really comes from being able to share the experience with those of you out there. And I would like to hear what you thought of this. If you don't if you didn't play it live, but have watched it after the fact, but you've played Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, I really am curious about your thoughts about this system. I guess I would say that I'm, again, pleasantly surprised. Now, this was not a particularly hard case, but there's something about it that's procedurally enjoyable. And I really do want to play more of these. And it really is worth thinking about. Why is this still enjoyable? And I'm not sure if the channel would agree with me about it being enjoyable. I mean, it's a little tricky. Some of this stuff doesn't convey as well. But it really is a different feel from Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. It really feels different. It mechanically operates a little differently, but it feels very different. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is all about reading these evocative dialogues and stories. And this feels much more like a tight police procedural, just the facts, no fluff, and right to the point. And there's something about it it's a different experience. It's a very different experience. It feels a little more realistic in some ways, a little more just going through the motions, but still there's some pleasure in it. And then a couple of those little details, a couple of the little choices that make it somehow work. It's the tight time limits. We've played other kinds of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective games that have time limits, and they almost inevitably fail and are frustrating. Here, it's different. It somehow works because there's no strict time limit, but you know your score is better, but it doesn't pressure you too much. And it's not as wide open, maybe. You're sort of just following you're following the key leads. But then this little twist about the alerts and how you end the game. You don't end the game. It's that ending is very clever. In these normal mystery games, you say, I think I understand it, so let me turn and answer questions. And then you get some time to think about it. These cases are interesting in that they say, you have to say what you're going to do. You have to declare who you're going to arrest and blame before you turn to the end. That's a very interesting thing. And there was some cool stuff at the end of that case, right? Like, if we didn't arrest this guy in time, his brother was gonna kill him. That was pretty cool. Let's see what the chat says. Definitely fits in a space between Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Gumshoe, says Joseph. Debbie says, I feel we did better now that we know how the game works. It's more evidence-based. With Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, we'd be dreaming up all sorts of clever scenarios. Yeah, I think that's right. Rob says, I think it's fine entertainment for these shorter Sunday streams. It's fun to follow along. Perry says, mechanically very procedural. Crime is a bit mundane. It's true. It's sort of this is really sort of a just the facts, ma'am crime. Robbery, someone got shot, not your convoluted, diabolical crime like in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective where there's some locked room and you can't possibly explain it. This is real run-of-the-mill street crime and solving it. But it scratches an itch. Joseph says, I enjoy it. Part of me wishes it had more emphasis on the exposition. One sentences can be infuriating at times. Debbie says, I agree. TJ Moneycut says, the system's good. The writing is dry. Cases seem realistic, not super interesting. Arrests and alerts are cool, but not sure how much I like the actual mug book mechanic. Yeah, I didn't even talk about the mug book. I'm not sure. That's the one part I'm a little questionable about myself. But maybe you could sum it all up, everything that all of us are saying up by saying, what's particularly cool here is that this really is different. You can see the similarities. You can see they are cousins. This and Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Gumshoe are cousins, but they really feel different. And they have different philosophies of design, different stylistic stuff. I am looking forward to playing more of these. I think the next game we should play should be the long one. I think we should play the next one. I think the next one should be the long one. Anyway, I had a blast. Do stop by the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel. You'll find a link on the About page. And in that section of Board Game Geek, in that forum, there's a thread called the Game Queue where I list all the games I have and own and talk about which ones we can play next. And let me know what games you would like to play next. Maybe we'll play another Deadbolt Mystery Society box, maybe something else. We still have some Mythos tales to cover, but I do want to hear what you'd like to play. And you can also stop by the Discord for the channel where I hang out. There's a link to that on the About page. I'll see you next time.